So I was noticing something, and I'm trying to figure out exactly what the common denominator is here. But I'm looking at the Eagles draft board, and I'm seeing, all right, so Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, Keely Ringo. They traded for DeAndre Swift. Huh. Sure seems like
a bunch of Georgia Bulldogs. Somebody really enjoys Georgia. The Philadelphia Bulldogs.
It just seems like there's a theme there to go with the 2 players from Georgia they took last year. Man, Philly just loves those Georgia Bulldogs, huh?
I mean, they win.
Yeah.
You got to run on national championships. They win. So, it is what it is, right? I mean, the winner reaps the spoils is what they say, or whatever.
There's worse strategies, right? Like, hey, this team's won the national championship the past 2 years, largely led by their defense. Let's just go draft all those guys. Like, that kind of makes a lot of sense if you think about it. I mean, Jordan Davis, Nakobe Dean last year. You got 3 more guys, and Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, and Keely Ringo. And honestly, the best part about all of it is they didn't reach for any of them. Jalen Carter ended up there at 9. They trade from 10 to 9. That's not a reach. He's arguably the best overall prospect in the draft class. Nolan Smith was a player that, when you listen to some people talk, they're like, well, if they took him at 9, people wouldn't have been upset about it because he showcased that sort of athleticism and that sort of ability during his time at Georgia. They get him in the 30th pick. And then you look at Keely Ringo. Most people didn't think he'd get out of the second round. I sure didn't, not based on his tape. I mean, he's tall, he's long, he's fast. He's, he got a lot of the skills that you're looking for that translate to the next level. And he ends up in the 4th round. So the other thing is, it's not like they're going out of their way to bring on these players. They're getting them at good spots, too, where they're not having to get up a ton for it. And I guess if you include DeAndre Swift into this mix, look, they get him for a year. He's got a year under contract. Maybe they can agree to a more economical contract to extend him for another year or so. But it was also a need. Like, even with their stable of running backs, they now get a guy in there who's a bit more of a kind of, I don't want to say a dynamic playmaker, but, it can help replace the loss of Miles Sanders. So I loved what they did in the draft. I actually loved their entire draft. I mean, they got Steen, the tackle out of Alabama. That provided some depth there, too. I mean, they kind of just drafted the SEC. That's essentially what they've done.
They're deep. Philly's deep. They got to be considered to be far and away the favorite coming into this season, especially within the NFC East. Now, in terms of the entirety of the NFC, I wouldn't feel bad putting them right there at the top as well.
Odds say they're behind San Fran. The Niners are the favorite to come out of the NFC.
Yeah, I'm looking at what currently the Eagles are. I would be more comfortable saying the Eagles right now.
I would too. I don't think the San Francisco thing, and we talked about it maybe last week or the week before, with their unanswered questions at quarterback, I just don't know how everybody goes into this season and says, oh, screw it, make the Niners a favorite. I mean, Brock Purdy's not healthy, neither is Trey Lance, and we haven't seen enough of Trey Lance to know anything.
The Eagles' defensive front, here's what you got to understand. When you get a guy like a Jalen Carter and you already have a bunch of guys out there, and then you got Fletcher Cox as like the senior statesman of a group, you don't have to have a ton of experience. That's one of those positions where you actually can translate quickly into having success at this level. So when you're talking about having that type of a rotation with that type of talent, it's just going to be very, very uncomfortable dealing with that defensive front. And they got active linebackers, and it's that Philly-style thumper linebacking mentality. It's just, and they loaded up their secondary. Like it's just not going to be good. It's going to be a lot of carnage when Philadelphia is playing people this year. I mean, I'm predicting pain. When you look at the way they're the way they're configured, Philadelphia they're probably going to be better, most likely, than even what they were last season.
If you go back the last 20 years, it's hard to find an organization that's as consistent as Philly. And what I mean by that is they've had success with every single head coach they brought on. Andy Reid, they had success. When they moved on from him, they had success with Chip Kelly. They won a division his first year. They moved on from him. They brought in Doug Peterson, obviously had success, won a Super Bowl. Then they turn it over. They bring in a new head coach, Nick Sirianni, have success. We're talking different quarterbacks, different coaches, and every single time. If I was a team and my favorite team was not the Eagles, I'd be pissed at my team that they weren't looking at the league and how to build their roster like the Eagles do, because they're never satisfied. Like, this is a team that was just in the Super Bowl, and they're out wheeling and dealing, adding great players. And of course, they would be the team that would add DeAndre Swift. Of course they would. Of all the teams, like, of course it would be Philly that would make the move on Saturday.
Well, here's the thing: is that they can afford to do so because of the Hurts contract. As big as it was reported, it's one that doesn't hit them big time in the cap this year, and because the way it's structured, which, if you look at the voidable years, by the way, of this deal, I don't know if we talked about this last week or not. He's got like 4, I think, additional voidable years that are attached till 2032. I mean, they'll be on the. I mean, and by the way, it makes sense because you've got Hurts, who's a young player still in this league. You've extended him. You used the last year of his rookie deal. Then you have the 5-year extension on top of that. And then you have 4 voidable years that they don't matter because if Hurts plays the way they think he's going to play, they'll renegotiate and extend him in this contract. And so they'll restructure what that looks like moving forward. So that's just the funny thing about these contracts that get reported is you're like, okay, call it, put whatever tag you want on the contract and what was put out there. But the truth of the matter is none of it's real. I mean, like let's say things don't work out for Jalen Hurts. They will be paying for him almost for the next decade. Almost for the next decade. That's how this contract is structured. So it's just, anyway, they've got room to be able to build around him because of the way that the contract is structured. Even though it's advertised as the biggest, well, at least before the most recent contract, but the biggest in NFL history before Lamar's. That's what everyone was saying. Well, it's not really if you really break it down.
But yeah, if you just look at it overall, you can say that until you get into the details, and so you pump that up, and then it was Lamar Jackson took his deal, and now we get to wait to see who gets the next big contract. But it's just funny, man. Philadelphia always the team. Like last year, A.J. Brown could potentially be traded. Well, of course, Philly's the one that did it. Of course, like why wouldn't it be Philly? They're always adding pieces, always adding guys, even after they were just in a Super Bowl with the quarterback who was the best player on the field. So, yeah, that's where it stands right now. Philadelphia and San Francisco looked at as the favorites to come out of the NFC. I'll take my chances with Philly. No Super Bowl hangover with Philadelphia. We feel confident that they're going to still make a deep run there, VAR.
I do. If they stay healthy and they gain experience quickly within the season and find that continuity. I mean, even if they don't find total equilibrium with continuity on the defensive side of the ball, I just think if I'm a defensive coordinator with that type of personnel, I'm letting them fly. Like, fly around. Just fly. Now, I don't know if I'm telling them 2 gap, 1 gap. I don't give a damn. Go get ball. See ball, get ball. And if you keep it that simple with that type of athleticism and just sheer firepower, and brute strength up front, man, I just don't understand how that's been, like, that's a defensive front. I just don't even understand it. Like, if you really think about it, it's kind of.
What I don't get is when teams, for some reason, like, they'll go a different direction. I mean, not that Dalton Kincaid's a bad player, but I didn't think that was a need for the Bills. They've got Dawson Knox in their contract in 2026, but they go get another tight end. Okay. That's fine if they've got something else in mind. Maybe they want to play more 2 tight end sets, but you can't find these really good big guys all throughout the draft and be able to play them early in their career. Otherwise, they need some development or they need some technical training. And that's where you look at a first-round pick like that and you're going, all right, granted, they get Osiris Torrance in the second round to help out their interior offensive line, but you're telling me you couldn't have used more depth up front on your defensive line or your offensive line? You couldn't have used another potential interior player? Big men are so on each side of the football. It's how you build your roster, and it's rare every year when they come out where you get guys who are truly NFL ready. So unless there's a need elsewhere, I just always find it surprising when teams are just loading up their roster with guys who are capable of playing.
Philly got the best big defensive lineman in the last 2 drafts.
Yeah.
in Jalen Carter.
And Davis the year before.
Yeah. It's,
like the last 2 drafts, they took the best 2 big defensive linemen in the draft. Like 2 years in a row.
Imagine being an offensive lineman and you're like, oh, okay, thank God Jordan Davis is going out for a blow, thank God. And then you see Jalen Carter walk in, having to deal with that rotation.
Hey man, when them dudes get up off of that when they get up off that bus, they gonna be like, God dang. What are they? Those are aliens.
Those are monsters.
Jeez. They get up off that. They come up off that bus. You're going to see the bus going back up. It's going to be close to the ground. That bus going to raise back up like 3-4 inches after they walk off. You're going to feel the ground shaking when they walking into the locker room. Can you imagine what warm-ups is going to look like? Quarterback's going to be sitting there like, man, I'll take y'all out. I'll take y'all to Capitol Grill after this one, man. Just please hold up.
Hey, Brady, have you ever been
Try to hold up.
You ever warm up before a game and see somebody on defense and go, Christ. Like, we got to deal with that.
Oh, man.
No, because usually the entire week you're thinking that when you're watching them on film. The only person that I remember thinking, dang, that boy's big, was when we were playing against the Giants. I think we had him in I think it was like a preseason game. And Brandon Jacobs walked by.
Oh, man.
I looked at one of the coaches. I was like, who's that? Was that one of their DNs? They're like, no, man, that's Brandon Jacobs. I was like, I was like, our guys have to tackle that dude?
S.
Like, okay. Welp. I was like, we probably need to build a lead on this one, huh? Make him throw the football a little bit more.
And he was fast.
Yeah.
Not only was he ginormous, he was fast, too. So, and that's what you're going to deal with them Georgia boys in Philadelphia. Big, strong, fast.
Yeah, they're going to be fun to watch.
And God bless. Oh, it is going to be fun to watch, man.